Welcome to a splice of life science marketing, your go-to show for life science marketing professionals in biotech, medtech, and diagnostics. Join us for sharp, strategic conversations that turn cutting-edge insights into real-world marketing advantage. I'm Matt Wilkinson.
And I'm Jasmine Gruia-Gray. In each episode, we'll cut through the hype and complexity with practical plays you can use to earn trust, stand out in crowded categories, and convert attention into momentum.
Hi, Jasmine.
Hello, Matt. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. And you?
It's a little bit of a gray day here in Virginia, but the cherry blossoms are blooming, so that's fun.
Nice. I'm just waiting for our cherry blossom to bloom, but it's a very wet and not particularly appealing day here in the south coast of the UK. So let's get started with talking about a blog that you've just written. And I want you to imagine your last Monday morning that was full. Your task list was somewhere north of 50 items, most of them tagged urgent. You opened your laptop and within the first hour, you reformatted a competitive comparison slide that sales had asked for. It took you 40 minutes. They glanced at it for 90 seconds. That's the gap this episode is about, the gap between feeling productive and actually being strategic. Today, let's discuss this DRAG framework that you discussed, which stands for Drafting, Research, Analysis, and Grunt work. In it, you argue that most of this is an AI delegation system for life science product managers and that they actually need it. I think it's a strong start that maybe doesn't even go far enough. We're going to find out which of us right.
Let's do it.
Excellent. So you're asking product managers to fix a behavior problem on their own. But if someone is drowning in admin work, isn't that a management failure, not a product management behavior failure? Why does the individual carry the entire fix?
Well, it's because waiting for your organization to redesign itself is not a strategy. I've watched so many product managers in life science companies sit in those FYI meetings for 3 years, waiting for someone above them to notice the problem, and nothing changes. Completion bias is real. A Harvard Business Review study found CEOs spend 72% of their total work time in meetings, averaging 37 meetings per week. Product managers compound that pattern because their brains treat formatting an internal status slide the same as designing a pricing model. Same dopamine hit, same sense of progress. And this isn't unique to product managers. The admin work wins because it's completable right now. The DRAG framework doesn't require an organizational change. You pick 5 tasks on your current list, you route the drafting and the grunt work to AI, and you use the reclaimed hours for important stuff like customer discovery. That's within your control today. You don't need approval. You don't need a new job title. You need to make a different decision about where your attention goes.
It's hard to argue with completion bias. It's real. I fall into that trap myself. But the framing that product managers can simply choose to protect their strategic time, I think often ignores what actually fills that admin backlog. You know, the most destructive administrative work isn't self-assigned. It comes from above. A director decides the PM is the safest person to reformat a validation protocol. A VP sends an email at 5 p.m. expecting a competitive slide by the morning. A cross-functional team adds the PM to a recurring meeting because removing them feels politically awkward. I agree that drag gives PM a useful filter for the work they control, but it doesn't give them a way to decline the work that gets pushed onto them. And in many life science organizations, especially in pharma, the culture around PM availability is deeply embedded. You can set a delegation boundary for yourself. You can't set it for your director. The framework seems valuable, but presenting it as enough without addressing role clarity or stakeholder management seems like it's setting the PM up to feel like they failed the framework when the real problem is the system.
I think the stakeholder problem is real. I'm not dismissing it, but here's what I've actually seen work. When you respond to that 5 p.m. competitive slide request with, look, I'll have AI put the initial research in by the end of the day. Then I'll add strategic context on positioning gaps by tomorrow morning. You've done something important there. You've committed to a faster, more thorough output than you used to deliver manually. You've routed the mechanical work to AI per the drag framework, and you've demonstrated that your drag delegated process outperforms your old manual one, at least from a time perspective. And stakeholders care about outcomes as much as they care about speed. The more consistently you deliver better results faster with this approach, the more credibility you build to protect the time that matters. And that's not waiting for the organization to change, that's changing the organization's expectations through performance. The individual fix is the entry point to the systematic fix, not a substitute for it.
That's fair. But the blog promises 15 to 20 hours per week could be freed up using it. That's nearly half a standard work week. I mean, I know that most product managers work way over the standard working week, but in life sciences where AI outputs need serious domain curation before they're usable, isn't that figure setting PMs up to feel like failures when they only get 6?
The number is based on applying drag consistently across all 4 of those categories, not just the easy ones. And I'll defend it because I've lived it. For research specifically, deep competitive intelligence on a new ELISA kit launch, on market sizing for a spatial biology platform, on reimbursement pathway mapping for a companion diagnostic, these tasks used to consume days upon days, if not close to weeks. AI research tools now fire hundreds of secondary queries, consolidate results, and deliver 80% of what you need in a matter of minutes. I'm not spending days or weeks anymore. And that math compounds quickly. So, for an analysis perspective, AI reading beta feedback from 12 early adopters and identifying that 8 of them mentioned workflow integration unprompted, that synthesis used to take lots of time. Now it takes 20 minutes maybe of review. The AI spots the pattern. That's what AI is really good at. And I interpret what it means for the next phase gate decision. So the human is definitely still in the loop. And the AIM protocol, which is actor input and mission for drafting, handles the blank page problem. Act in a specific role, provide the input context, state the mission. The output is rough, but editing is faster than creating, at least for me. My brain engages completely differently when I have something to react to versus starting from a blank page.
I think that's fair. And I can definitely see where some of these tasks are absolute game changers. In analyzing big sets of data, particularly trying to conduct a thematic analysis of transcripts from voice of customer interviews, AI is fantastic at that. But I do want to engage with the math honestly, because, as a recovering scientist and somebody that's been measured on how accurate or not I've been, making sure the framework holds up is crucial. And I kind of feel that's where it's potentially most vulnerable. Now, the 15 to 20 hours figure assumes a task profile where AI can take a meaningful first pass without extensive setup. For generic business tasks, that's fine. But life sciences PM work is technically specialized in ways that change the economics. Positioning a 48 color flow cytometry panel for immunology researchers is not a task where a generic AI draft is 80% of the way there without significant context loading. Getting the AIM protocol right for that task requires domain knowledge, careful specification of the competitive landscape, and a review against customer conversations AI never had access to. Now, that's cognitive work. It's not zero. And even if you've got that, it can take time to build both the capability to do that, the knowledge to do it, and also make sure the data's in the right place. I'm not saying that this isn't going to take time. It clearly would. I guess I'm just challenging whether the 15 to 20 hours is realistic.
Yeah, the fluency point is a fair one. Week one of drag is slower than week four because you're building the AIM protocols, the context libraries, the reusable AI workflows. That setup cost is real, as well as the cost to your own mental state and familiarity of working with drag. But here's the thing. The FAQ in the blog addresses recurring requests explicitly. Building AI workflow once and then reuse it. Competitive updates, FAQ additions, technical translations. Once those workflows exist, they compound. The PM who spent 3 months building drag infrastructure isn't in the same position as the one who tried it twice. So, yes, 6 to 8 hours in the early stages is probably more accurate. But the framework's promise is about what it becomes with consistent application, not what it delivers on day one. The honest version of the claim is 15 to 20 hours is the ceiling you're building toward. That's worth saying plainly, and I think that's accurate.
That's fair enough. So here's an uncomfortable question then. If you outsource the synthesis of the data, do you gradually lose the ability to spot the anomaly that doesn't fit the pattern? The one comment from a key opinion leader that signals a bigger problem. Do you miss those outliers? Is drag quietly making PMs less sharp?
Yeah, that's a huge, whether you call it cognitive offloading, or there was a recent paper by some Wharton professors that are now calling it cognitive surrender. The concern assumes synthesis and interpretation are the same cognitive activity, but they're not. When AI analyzes beta feedback from 12 sites and surfaces that 8 of them mentioned workflow integration unprompted, I still read that output. I still form my own conclusions about what those patterns mean for the next phase gate decision. When AI drafts a positioning document, I'm rewriting some large percentage of it based on customer conversations AI never heard. The mechanical assembly of information and the strategic interpretation of what it means are very different. The test the blog gives is the right one. If you're spending more time reviewing AI output than talking to customers, you've crossed the line. Drag should free 15 to 20 hours at maximum per week. Those hours should go into direct customer interactions like alpha site visits or discovery calls, pricing conversations with strategic accounts, for example. More customer exposure sharpens judgment, it doesn't dull it. The risk of strategic decay is real, but it's a risk of how you use the free time, not of the framework itself.
That's a sound philosophy there. But I want to name a subtler version of the problem that the framework doesn't necessarily fully address. Pattern recognition in technical markets comes partly from doing the synthesis yourself. And when you manually read beta feedback from 12 sites, they don't extract the themes that AI surfaces. They notice the tone. They catch the comment from the PI at a top 10 research institution that's phrased as mild concern, but actually signals a serious workflow problem. They connect it to a conversation from maybe 3 months ago at the last conference they attended. AI analysis surfaces themes across data sets, and it's brilliant at doing that. But it doesn't necessarily pick up that big picture analysis. And so I think that anomaly detection comes from domain expertise. And if we're using this sort of approach, we really need to make sure that we're staying rooted in the domain and making sure that we're practicing that. So I think it's about a balance of practicing there. I'm definitely not saying avoid it. I think it's a really helpful model. I think we just have to be really intentional about which analytical tasks we fully delegate versus which ones we use AI to assist with. After all, we know that using Excel and spreadsheets has been a huge time saver for many, many tasks that trying to do things by hand would be, just would not make sense to do anymore. So these are definitely tools we should be adopting. Please don't get me wrong there. I think it's just a case of making sure that we're not offloading the wrong things.
Yeah, so the anomaly detection point is a really good one. And you're right that AI surfaces themes. It doesn't always surface the outlier that may matter most. And that's why it's so important to keep the human in the loop, as we've always been saying, and as many, many other experts say. Drag isn't a prescription to stop reading your data. It's a prescription to stop manually assembling it before you read it. The AI synthesizes, but you interrogate. If I get an AI analysis of beta feedback and something feels thin, I definitely go back to the source comments. That option is always available. The beta site PI example we've described is exactly the kind of signal that a good PM catches during the interrogation pass, not the assembly pass. The assembly was never where that judgment lived. So the question isn't whether drag risks your anomaly detection, it's whether you're disciplined enough to interrogate the AI synthesis rather than accepting it as complete, which is sort of going into that territory of cognitive offloading and surrendering if you just think it's complete. That's a reasonable bar, and it's not a fatal flaw in the framework.
Okay, so I'm convinced, and I think that we don't want to conflate the framework with some of the challenges that AI are bringing into the way that we think and operate anyway. It definitely feels that drag is a really sensible first layer of solving this challenge. And it feels like it gives PMs a systematic method for routing mechanical work to AI and reclaiming the sort of the cognitive bandwidth to do higher value tasks. I guess we just have to be really, really disciplined about protecting those reclaimed hours before the admin backlog refills, and making sure that we're doing enough interrogation of AI outputs that we don't outsource our own anomaly detection as part of that process.
Yeah, that's totally fair. Drag works when you treat it as a thinking discipline, not just a time saving tool. The delegation boundary doesn't maintain itself. You have to build the workflows, protect the calendar blocks, and stay close enough to your data to catch the signal AI misses. If you do those things, up to 15 to 20 hours is real. If you don't, you just processed more admin faster.
And I think the most useful test from the blog, if you're spending more time reviewing AI output than talking to customers, you've probably crossed the wrong line.
Right. Well, this has been tons of fun. Thanks again, Matt.
And you too, Jasmine. Thank you for listening to a splice of life science marketing. We hope you enjoyed the episode.
If this conversation helped you, the single biggest way you can support the show is to subscribe and leave a review on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts. We'd really appreciate it, and it makes a huge difference.
You can find out more about us and the topics we discuss at striven.com or on LinkedIn. Thank you so much for listening. We hope to see you next time.